to our last National Academy Ask Me Anything of the spring 2020 semester. We couldn't be more happy to be with you today. So my name is Keith Molenaar. I'm an NAC member and also a professor at the University of Colorado. The National Academy of Construction was established to recognize our industry leaders. An important part of this purpose is to provide a network or a system of linkage between the past and present participants of the construction industry. As such, we've established this National Academy of Construction Ask Me Anything to help transfer knowledge to our next generation of construction leaders. So thank you again for joining us today. Our format's simple. Our speaker, in this case, Sabrina Kanner, today will make a short presentation about her career and her perspective on the industry. If you haven't already, please email your questions to letters there, nacama@colorado.edu. We'll ask those questions, and at the end of this presentation, one student will get a gift of $500. So do email in those questions so I can make sure to have you eligible for the drawing. So Sabrina Kanner is an Executive Vice President for Design and Construction with Brookfield Properties. She oversees the firm's design and construction in the U.S. She's a cum laude graduate of Union College, where she had her bachelor's degree in English. You can see some of the wonderful projects that she's been a part of as I give a little background here. Her career began in 1982 with Brookfield's predecessor company, Olympia in York. Her initial work there was in the construction division. In 1986, she was appointed to run the firm's construction company. In her tenure with the construction company, Sabrina's played key role in construction, design, and development or redevelopment of over 40 million square feet. That's right, 40 million square feet of Brookfield projects. Some of these include the World Financial Center, Brookfield Place, 300 Madison Avenue, the restoration and renovation of Winter Garden at the World Financial Center after 9/11, and currently Manhattan West. So look forward to hearing about that project today. She's very active outside of her company as well. She's a member of WX, which is Women Executives in Real Estate in New York. She sits on the board of directors of the New York Building Congress, and she's serving as treasurer there. The Salvadori Center, where she chairs, and then she's also members of the board at the Opus Group, the Regional Plan Association, Urban Green Council, Cedar Reality Trust. She also sits on the board of trustees for the National Building Museum and the Beverly Willis Architecture Foundation. So Sabrina, you're really keeping busy outside of your normal day-to-day operations as well. It's wonderful to see all of the projects that you've worked on go by here. I just wanted to invite you to just say a few words, reflect on your career a little bit and the industry, and then when you're done, let me know and I'll start to give you some of the questions from our participants. So Sabrina, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm enjoying scrolling through my own projects here. So some of them more recent than others, and some of the old favorites are fun to see again. I think it's important to, especially given the age of the people that I'm speaking with today, like go back to my days in high school, I think it's important to note that I was really interested in many different directions. I was probably strongest in math, put together a portfolio because I considered going into art school, and ended up going to a liberal arts college where I took a degree and majored in English. So today we would say I was unsettled. Then I was excited about everything. And it's important to note that when I graduated with a liberal arts degree in 1980, you could do almost anything with that degree. People went into investment banking. It was a very different atmosphere. And much of the thinking was that you learned what you needed to learn on the job. So I was very fortunate in that respect. And early days, I worked for a small contractor and really more on the financial side. And financial is probably an overstatement. It was more accounts payable, accounts receivable, payroll, that kind of thing. But they got very busy and they needed help with estimating. So they taught me how to estimate, how to do a takeoff. And we won some of those jobs, so I ran them, and they came in on time and made money. And so I was bitten by the bug, and I never looked back. So was at that job for just a couple of years and went home to my family in New York, where I applied for a job at Olympia, New York, the way most people did back in 1982. I answered an ad in the New York Times classified, and I wrote a letter in, and sure enough got a letter back. And because of my unique combination of estimating and financial reporting, I was offered the job. So of course the pull of estimating was immediate, and the financial reports apparently could wait, and I was pulled in full-time junior estimator, senior estimator, became chief estimator, begged my way into my first project management job. All I wanted to do was run a job. And lo and behold, I got the chance. So I definitely one of those stories where you start off in the mailroom and work your way up, and I probably had every job in between. But I must say, I count myself as very fortunate to have started in estimating, because I think it very much formed the way I think today. I believe there's no better background in a way, because you're building the job in your head. You must understand the sequencing, the various trades, logistics, how to feed materials into the job, how to sequence the shop drawings, the engineering, so that those materials feed in on a timely basis. It's all done in your head. And once you've got that down, believe it or not, the shift to project management is fairly simple. Then you're just dealing with people. So, and that might be the hardest thing, but the most complicated thing, also one of the most rewarding things. So just a brief moment on Olympia, New York, went to work there and worked on some very exciting projects, some of which you're looking at here today. And we finished World Financial Center, and the company by and large moved over to London to work on Canary Wharf. And at that time in my life, I had a toddler and was pregnant with my second child. And my husband was in medical field, and so socialized medicine was not an easy transition. And I got left behind. I was still with Olympia, New York, but feeling very, very sorry for myself. And was told, look, please stay here. We need somebody here. And we promise life will come back to New York. Well, I'm not sure who knows the story about Olympia, New York, but they went bankrupt on Canary Wharf. And they padlocked the doors because the laws over in London are not quite as forgiving as they are here in the United States. And all my colleagues were on the street over there, no job, no way to get home. So be good or be lucky, that one is in the be lucky column. So the company itself was taken over by Brookfield that had a senior piece of debt. And they came in and processed the work out for the entire portfolio. And so the company became Brookfield. And we were a much, much smaller company. And we hunkered down and sat through the recession then, which was in the late 90s. And towards 2000, decided to put our hat in the ring again and try to develop. And we did that. We were a really small company. We were maybe 38, 40 people. And I think most of us had a finger in that project. Well, that project came in on time despite the events of 9/11, also made money. and we were off to the races. And I mean, now Brookfield is a company of $200 billion of assets under management. At the moment, I have approximately $12 billion worth of projects underway in the Northeast section of the country rather. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful ride. I manage design, construction, development, a team of about 100 people. And our model is different than Olympia, New York's was. Olympia, New York actually ran construction companies, so I was literally running a construction company there. Here at Brookfield, we hire third parties, but we manage them. So that, in a very short amount of time, gets you to where I am today. And I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a wonderful story. And today you are in Manhattan, right? Where I am. And our hearts are with you and everybody up there. So.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
You know, I love your story. And one thing I didn't realize we shared is I started in estimating too. And it's just such a great place to learn all about the industry. You get to build multiple buildings virtually versus, you know, physically being on buildings for years at a time. So I really enjoyed it. It brings me to a good question from Melody Zhang. You know, we were talking about visualization and things. She says she's not very good at visualizing objects in 3D, but she wants to be a construction engineer. Is this something she can learn, or does she need to choose another major?
Well, I would never tell you to change another major because you'd be missing out. But I think you can learn. I think there's nothing you can't learn. I think it's probably helpful to take a two-dimensional plan and look at your three-dimensional object and go back and forth until it clicks in your head. But you absolutely can learn to visualize and learn to translate in your brain. And even for those of us that comes simply to and naturally, I think over time we get better. So I'm sure that it's something that you can grasp with just a little bit of practice, for sure.
Yeah, you know, that talks a little bit about, you know, different skills and learning through construction. A couple of our students, Grace and Peter, were both interested in how you've done in the construction industry with your English degree. Has that been helpful, or do you think it's been a deterrent for you?
Look, I think communication is fundamental to everything you do. And I will say that I credit a lot of my ability to communicate not only through writing, but also through the written word or standing up and explaining to a group of people. I think I gained a lot of that through my English background, not to mention the fact that I'm still a voracious reader. So, and sometimes you need to disconnect at the end of your day too, and take your brain in a very different direction so that you can rest. And it does provide me with that. I will say though, while I was studying English, I did take a fair amount of math and business courses. So I would never say that it was ever a waste of time. And I think it was very much a very sound foundation for not only what I do today, but how I do it.
I'm pretty certain your ability to write and communicate are a big reason for your success. Yeah, I know personally, when I graduated and had my first job as an estimator, I wasn't a good writer, and that held me back. And you know, practicing that skill really did help me. Now it's what I do a lot of, is writing papers and writing other things. But it really is a skill that's important. Can you give us other examples of where writing and communication have been important?
Sure. So as I progressed through my career, it became very important to meet with communities and explain our projects. meet with city agencies to explain why we really believed we needed to do what we were planning to do the way we were planning to do it. Communicating is really at the core of everything you do. I will say early in my career, I was probably writing more proposals than at the end of my career, but very definitely as I progressed, the ability to reach out, stand in front of a group of neighbors and explain to them that we cared very much about their neighborhood. We were part of their neighborhood too. And this was how we saw our building or our complex fitting in and joining, knitting them together, and how we intended to support the community through the architecture and the construction of the project. So.
Thank you. I appreciate you elaborating on that. I'm going to ask you just a few questions that are a little bit more general and broad towards your career, and then some people wanted to get into a little bit about construction companies, and a number of folks have COVID-19 on their mind as well, so we'll get to that. But let's see. Warner asks, what do you think is the most important thing to focus on when you're first starting to enter your career as an engineer?
I would say listening. I think it's important to understand everyone in the room has something to teach you. Very different and very varied, but I think especially engineering, because it requires such discipline and such logic, that to listen to how people use that logic and interpret that logic and explain that logic, applying it and supporting other areas of design is very important. There isn't anyone that you will meet in the course of your career that you can't learn something from. So I would encourage that. I think it's also great to respectfully engage with people on a regular basis. People enjoy sharing what they know. So again, I'm running back to my story of communication, but big believer in that. So I would encourage that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that reminds us that listening is as big a part of communication as writing or speaking or presenting as well. Riley asks a great question. Riley asks, what experience do you feel most grateful for during your career?
Well, there are actually a number, but the one I'm going to choose would be rebuilding the Winter Garden after 9/11. And so the Winter Garden is a big indoor park that is filled with palm trees, live palm trees, and it was destroyed during the events of 9/11. New York City actually took several months to decide whether or not they were going to condemn the building. It was really that impaired structurally. In the end, decided they would allow us to rebuild it. So I moved in and took over the project. And I will say at that time in construction, in that location, believe it or not, union jurisdiction was a real force to be reckoned with. And so there were electricians that claimed carpentry work and vice versa. But this particular project, we had none of that. I felt that the world kind of came together and understood that we were, instead of picking up guns, we were picking up our tools and we were putting something back together and making something beautiful for the community and setting something right. It was really the most rewarding thing I've ever done. And the 500 tradespeople that I worked with it was so moving. And we were so inspired. It was almost therapy through construction. So, and on top of it, what we were working on was this beautiful, beautiful jewel box of a public space. And we completed so fast. Took almost 3 years to build the first time. We rebuilt it in just under 8 months. And the president of the United States actually learned of it and said, I'd like to address General Counsel of the UN on the first anniversary of 9/11. May I do it there? So course we did. And then we went into overdrive, and Fit and Polish It was ready to open the doors for the president. And we were very proud and felt so much better for having reconstructed this beautiful little building. So I think that's my favorite.
Wow, what a wonderful story. It is amazing to see a team come together with a purpose like that, isn't it? But that is a phenomenal story. Oh, great. I'm going to ask you kind of a question the other way here from Raj. Raj asks, have you had any major failures in your life? And if so, would you please share how you tried to solve it?
Sure. Yeah, you know, I don't know if it counts as a major failure, but it was a failure, and it was a great lesson. And, you know, we're probably, economic downturns are on all of our minds right now. Well, this was during the downturn of 2008, 2009. And everyone was basically hunkering down, shutting down, and going quiet. Brookfield took the opportunity to actually work on some of our existing buildings that had big vacancies, and thought we would reposition and re-entice the market. And in this case, we rebuilt a plaza, a lobby, the retail, the elevators, and felt, first of all, very fortunate that we had a project to work on. But we didn't take it far enough. And so there's a lesson to be learned that there is a time when you don't go far enough in a project and you miss the mark and you fail to create value. There are always forces in our industry that will tell you, you must spend less, you must spend less. I learned what you need to do is identify the big idea, find the visionary concept, and then make sure you're getting the right price, the very best price for the big idea. Otherwise, you fail to create value. So, and there we were, maybe 8 years later, redoing that lobby. It didn't lease at the velocity it should have, nor at the pricing it should have. So, and interestingly enough, fast forward to Manhattan West, there was one site on the Manhattan West side. It was one of the last parcels that we acquired, and was the ugliest building in Manhattan. This was, oh, it was horrible. We used to laugh at it, and then found out one Monday morning our CEO had bought it over the weekend and said, here, see what you can do with it. Oh no. And this was another case where there were two factions in our group. That one said, we can't spend any money because we'll never get the rent here. And rents were probably trading at around an average of $30 a foot at the time we acquired it. And we came up with a great design. I mean, it was beautiful. Of course, I think so, but it was really transformational, and required a certain amount of money, and the underwriting required that we lease it at somewhere between, on average, between $50, $53 a foot. Well, the leasing team said, we can't do that, we can't do that. The two factions wrestled, and in the end, we went with the big idea. And I would share with you that we turned people away from that building. The last lease we signed was for over $100 a foot. So there's the power of great design for you. That story also revealed to us the power of sustainable design too. And so repositioning has become a real factor in how we think about real estate now from a sustainability position. There's, of course, either it's referred to as embedded carbon or embodied carbon, but the saving of the carbon that is expended during the construction process by minimizing what you do to an existing structure, should it be sound. And this was a great example of that. And I just, as an afterthought, went back to check energy usage in peak months before versus after, and similar occupancy. And we had decreased our electrical use in peak month to peak month by 50%. And yeah, and almost 60% reduction in steam peak month to peak month. So between saving the embedded carbon, which by the way was approximately 27 metric tons, which is not insignificant. And we all think in terms of carbon these days. As a matter of fact, there are laws in New York City at this point. But look at the energy we're saving. So very exciting story for us, and we're taking that forward. We've since then started 2 others. So, so stay tuned, yeah.
Can you, while we're on the topic, can you talk a little bit about your work on the Urban Green Council? What do you do there?
So I'm a board member there, but Urban Green is a forum where they really convene a number of people from different sectors within design, construction, real estate, and gain consensus and move sustainability agendas forward. They were actually instrumental in advising our mayor's office as what our local law 97 law was enacted, which is really the building emissions law, and the law I was just referring to, that aims to reduce carbon usage in buildings first by 2024 and then by 2030, and severe penalties if you don't make these thresholds. And it was basically Urban Green that helped the mayor's office, the committee, write that law. So I find them to be extremely informative, and I use them as a resource all the time. When I was looking at some of these repositionings, I went back to them and said, okay, how do I find out about embedded carbon? And they steered me to a study that was done that they participated in as well. The UN building had done some important work studying whether or not to tear down their existing structure about 10 years ago or to rebuild in place and renovate. And they ended up understanding that even with our current technology and the efficiencies in our mechanical systems and controls today, it would take 75 years for that payback to level out. So it was eye-opening. And so we talk about it all the time and kind of spread the word and use that as an example of how we can be responsible developers and help seeking out more repositioning projects as opposed to out of the ground.
Great, thanks for serving on that board and the council, and I appreciate what you're doing there. I'm going to switch topics a little bit, and let's see, Derek, Raj, a few others some of our listeners are about to enter the construction market, and some are even a little fearful here to do that. You have seen a few recessions and such. Do you think it's time to go boldly into the market, or and into the job sector, or do you think it's time to take a pause and do something else at the moment?
No, I would definitely go boldly into the market. I absolutely am bullish. Like I think there'll be some near-term impacts from what we're going through now. But first of all, it's a logistical problem. And we need lots of smart people to help figure this out. We spend enormous amounts of time every day. I'm on the phone all the time with the Building Congress, with Revenue, with other organizations, talking about how do we restart construction projects in a safe way to protect our workforce. Brainstorming these ideas all the time. I think the projects need to move forward. They need to move forward. And I think not only do they need to move forward, all of our governors, certainly out here on the East Coast, are talking about how do we jumpstart our economies as well. And they're asking the real estate industry, and we're talking about ways to help facilitate projects, frankly. So I'm very bullish on this. And I think much of this, certainly in the larger, denser markets, revolves around affordable housing. And that continues. I've got 6 of those going right now. They're multifamily projects, excuse me, with an affordable component. And I see more of that to come. I really believe that construction is a key to the resurgence of our economy.
Yeah, you really look historically, that's the way that the federal and state governments have spurred the economy through stimulus. Typically, I think personally more of highways or bridges, kind of infrastructure, but can you speak more to some of the opportunities that you'll see in the building sector or potentially from the stimulus coming out?
Sure. Well, I in particular do see a continuation of the boom we've been seeing in the multifamily sector. Mm-hmm. So there's no shortage of need. We have people today who have no homes. We have people who are governments who are looking for more affordable housing. And the market component is a great way to facilitate that. We are actually chasing 2 more right now. And one of them is over 1 million square feet. I can't tell you where it is, but my fingers, my toes, my eyes are crossed. We hope we land that one. And we've got a number that we're looking at in Washington as well. And these governments are pushing the private sector to move. At the moment, we've got some constraints on the debt market side, but I think that will be temporary. And I think as we move forward, you'll have some of the larger developers like Brookfield who will join the funding of some of these projects, at least initially, so that the banks come back and have confidence. So.
A few questions, Travis Faradula, are asking about how workers can protect themselves, or some of the techniques and physical aspects of it. I know, as we mentioned, you're right in the epicenter of people trying to protect themselves and have positive social distancing as well. Are you, in your leadership role, getting involved in the construction processes at that level?
Yes, as a matter of fact. So some of the changes that we've effected in order to protect our workforce are opening up multiple entries into a site, which means in the case of New York, that's also multiple security openings as well. So requiring more turnstiles, more gatekeepers. We have monitors outside to remind people to keep 6 feet back from the next person. And we are staggering work starts so that everyone doesn't arrive at once. We, in one case, are looking to put up an additional hoist, possibly, so that we can get manpower up the building a little more quickly with fewer on a hoist, fewer on a lift. We have added more hand washing stations. We've added more hand sanitation stations. We have duplicated shanties. We're discouraging shanties, but sometimes you need a place to park some things. And we've duplicated that and have team A and team B so that they don't cross-contaminate. And we're sanitizing high-touch areas multiple times a day and completely sanitizing at least once a week. So, and looking for more and more options. We're talking to other areas in the country. I have a site down in Washington where they divided a project into zones, and they divide the workforce by those zones by color. So you put a green sticker on your hard hat or a red sticker on your hard hat, and you only go to red zones so that we don't, again, have cross-contamination should someone fall ill.
Well, it's good to hear that you're so involved in the company, so forward-looking. I think we'll all be coming up with solutions to move back in, but the construction industry, keeping the projects moving is so important. I'm glad that all these positive mitigation measures are there. Back to the economic side, Derek is asking, about your view on what might happen in this recession versus others. You know, he mentioned 07, 08. We had recession in, you know, the early 2000 after the dot-com bust, or when I first started working in the early 90s, late 80s, we had a, you know, tough oil economy at that time. Do you see this, you know, economic crisis being different, or do you see it similar? Anything we can learn from your experience coming out of it?
Oh yeah, our thinking on this, and you know, at a high level in the company, we talk about this as the situation unfolds. Don't really believe it is as dire as then. The fundamental issue is a health issue, and the economy will follow. And as we look at what's happening in China, China is up and running. So we have to believe we're months behind them, but we are on that track. So we are pushing projects forward. We're ready to put shovels in the ground on projects, and really don't see this as quite the same situation. That was really economically driven, and it's a secondary knock-on effect.
Yeah, good points. Good points. You know, there's a few more COVID-19 questions, but I guess I would just ask you to wrap up with any other reflections that you have on this time, and then I'm going to switch topics. But is there anything that wasn't asked that you think might be helpful around the crisis right now, the pandemic?
You know, I think we've touched on most things. The one thing that I would add, part of what takes a lot of time in our day these days, is chasing through our supply chain risk. And so understanding where materials are manufactured, where they are assembled, how they get shipped, and understanding every stop within that supply chain has been a great deal of work, and we track it every single day. We understand who got a shipment off before they were deemed non-essential, and then continue to track that. We also, and it's important to note that we need to always keep an eye open to our force majeure clauses in all of our agreements, whether that be with construction managers, with architects and engineers, with tenants. And in many cases, this adds a whole new dimension to how our projects play out. It used to be, if there was a force majeure event, and this is clearly a force majeure event, day for day, you extended. But in the last 5 years, we saw a trend to cap force majeure. And so, you know, at the time, what could be longer than 60 days? Well, we may have some force majeure events a force majeure event that extends beyond 60 days. And so how to mitigate that, how to get back on your feet, and how to make up that time is part of a construction manager's value.
And just, I think most folks know what force majeure is, but maybe just if you could talk a little bit more about that. And I think you've had some other events up in New York that would qualify as well, right?
We have. Force majeure is an event that is unforeseeable and out of your control. So very often we cite acts of God, or a strike. It can even be considered a force majeure event. And clearly a pandemic was unforeseeable and certainly not planned for. We all hold a certain amount of contingency. We all have a certain amount of buffer for things that go wrong, because things do go wrong, weather does go wrong. But anything that would stress your project beyond what you would normally anticipate is a force majeure event.
Great. Thanks so much. We're actually really enjoying the conversation, but probably only have time for 3 or 4 more questions here. So I just wanted to give you a little heads up. I'm going to go back and ask some of the questions around advice for being successful in the industry. There's a number around there. Taylor, I think you've inspired a little bit. so as someone who wants to be in both the construction and real estate industry, not just an engineer or just a contractor or just in the real estate, but working the whole cycle there. What's paramount for people to learn about if they want to follow in your footsteps along the professional journey?
Okay, well, I would say, look, my roots are construction, so I'm a big believer in the power of the team. And I think to marshal the force that it comes from the team effort is first and foremost the key to success in anything in real estate. It also, by the way, is part of what makes it so much fun. I mean, we are in a team sport, and I like to say in this case, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts for sure. So it's very inspirational. And I think though, while we operate en masse in a team and can produce so much more and create so much more as a team, we also have to stop and recognize, acknowledge, and reward the contributions of the individual. And so I think it is extremely important to call out and congratulate somebody when they've got a great idea, when they step forward, when they work a little harder, when they produce something. And I think it just is more fun when you're part of a team to be recognized. So I would emphasize that for sure. Look, it's no secret that when I started in this field, there weren't a lot of women, and it was a tough place to be. And so what I learned from that is keeping it positive. And when you're dealt with an adverse room, a little humor, and always, and this advice I give to my kids who are 27 and 32, it's so much more effective when you ask in the positive. And I learned that very early on. If someone says, oh, we need to double the fresh air in this building, someone who says, well, I can't do that unless I get X, Y, Z, everyone shuts down. They stop listening to you. If you say, you know what, if I have X, Y, Z, I can solve that problem. People start coming forward and saying, I've got X, and I can help you find Y. And it's amazing how powerful that can be. So never lose sight of positivity. I would also say too, be a creative thinker. Think outside of the box and have confidence in your ideas. I think it's important to not follow along behind the person in front of you, but to always be thinking of what's a different way I could do this? How might I back up that backup plan? And how might I actually move ahead in a whole different direction that might change this project? And then have the confidence to see that through. And that was a lot of information in a short amount of time. 40 years.
That's really great information, inspiring. Two more questions here. One, it might be a little bit more difficult, but I think it's on Michael's mind. You talked a lot about positive aspects, communication, such. Have you ever had difficult ethical decisions that you've had to make? And could you share one of those with us?
I haven't. Was lucky enough to work for a very ethical company, and I'm not sure I could have continued if I didn't. I was really never in a position where I had to choose between doing something that wasn't aligned with my own morals and ethics, and I don't think I could have, frankly. So, I would encourage you to stick to your guns there. I don't think you ever have to do something that is unethical.
Well, I'm going to wrap up with this question from Ping, and that is to your theme of team. Ping wanted to know, what's the hardest challenge you faced working as a team, and how did you overcome it?
Well, I think sometimes you need part of your team to be, for instance, a city agency or someone you haven't chosen, but you must learn to work with them. And they may not really be welcoming. They may not be as open to your ideas or your project, and maybe don't share the same mindset as the rest of the team. And I can think of a few. I'm almost afraid to say them because somebody might know who I'm referring to. But there again, look, from my early days, there were many rooms where I'm sure I was the only woman in the room, and they all wished I'd leave. And you start to kind of develop a personal style that wins people over. You want to enlist people. You don't want to fight them. You want to win them over, and you want to get them thinking and get them aligned. And it's very important to find your cadence and to find your way and to find your style, your personal style. You'll be much more effective when you can.
Sabrina, thank you so much. I guess I'd just like to ask you just to close us out here, if you would, with anything that you'd like to leave. I have to tell you, I was really struck by the images and the photos of all the projects that you've worked on. It's quite a legacy, and I'm sure you probably get a thrill every time you walk by one of them or see them as well. But is there anything you'd like to say in closing to our folks who are listening?
Sure. I would encourage you all to go forward. I think construction kind of sits in the nexus of the technical, the commercial, and the beautiful. It's a wonderful place to be. It's really something very special. And I get a chance to speak to young people from time to time, such as I'm doing now. And I'm so excited for you in your future. And think about how far we've come in my career, and here you are on our shoulders, and how far you will go in terms of innovation and creativity and sustainability. There's so much out in the world for you to conquer and expand upon, and I'm excited for you all.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate you giving your time here. I know how busy you are, and you have so much going on. We really do appreciate it, and just couldn't thank you more.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So we do have one more thing to do, and that's to announce who the winner is of the $500 donated by the National Academy of Construction and all its members. And today it's Elsa Moreno from Oregon State University. So Elsa, congratulations. Jane has your email. She will, Jane Manalo helps us with this, and she has your email, and she'll be in contact with you. So congratulations, Elsa. And I would just like to thank the National Academy of Construction, Wayne Crew, Sandy Pittman, and all of the members who've donated to make this possible. It's been a wonderful spring series of events, and couldn't think of a better way to close it out than with you today, Sabrina. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Be safe.
Bye-bye.